Hi all. Right, so the second side pod mold which we've polished, and we tried making a new side pod. That's the left hand side one. This is the right hand side mold. This is the first part we pulled from it. Unfortunately, I had something that I've never had before. That's what's basically called pre-release. You can see these two spots, that's where it should be. This surface here is released away from the mold before it even managed to get one layer of fiberglass behind it. So the gel coat has lifted away from the mold. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't the only place. It actually did it in quite a few places. So instead of having a nice flat surface, it's the incorrect surface. So I'm not filling and painting. This is going to be a gel coat polished. So we're now experiencing something I've never done before, pre-release. That's a pain. So we realized the gel coat had basically pulled off because I could feel it tapping and fill the gap. So basically I just put one layer with some of my nasty resin that I got left, some bits in here, threw one layer of resin in it and a layer of fiberglass, just basically so it would pull the part out, so I wouldn't have to chip away the mold. Now we did that in here the other week. Now I mistakenly didn't think it was the release agent, and I cleaned it out, put another layer of release agent in there, and the first layer of gel coat, I could see it lifting within 4 hours. It was ridiculous. So basically what I've had to do now is I pulled all the gel coat out. I wasn't going to resin any more of that. Managed to get all the gel coat out reasonably cleanly. So yes, great release agent. Unfortunately, too bloody good. You need at least the gel coat and it to form the shape, but if the gel coat lifts away from it, that's not good. So we presently took the mold apart. I've now repolished the mold, so theoretically tried to remove as much of that Stoner G495 release agent, and I'm going to just traditionally wax and see if that stops it, which is a real pain because the Stoner was real simple to apply. Unfortunately, it was just too damn good, and it did this one, strangely, it did this one fine. There's no pre-release on here anywhere, so I'm not quite sure what the difference was between doing that one and this one. Something's gone slightly different. I've got to have to test and play around with it yet, but this one was fine. There's no pre-releases anywhere, so this one's great. Second one, not so much. So, which is a bit of a pisser because I was hoping to have the two side pods on and start relining the center clip on. But whatever, it's all a learning curve. It's the loss of a couple of these gel coat and sort of 3 or 4 litres of resin, but such is life. The diffuser, I wanted the two diffuser tunnels to be safe, so they're not too much volume gains as you get to the end, so therefore not trying to massively accelerate the air too much that I'd end up stalling the diffuser. But what it ended up with was basically a very square shape here. And I had two vertical strakes, so I made a separate little tiny section between here and the rear plate at 8 degrees, so you had like another section of the diffuser directly underneath this, which made sense in my head. And I put it on, and basically you end up with a square or a rectangular box around that center section. And yeah, it started to bug me. It wasn't, as much as it was functional, it just started to bug me. I didn't like the shape, and I've already made the molds for that particular shape. Obviously the outer shape mold, the one that's sitting over there somewhere, I can still use the outer shape one, but the inner ones and the tunnel part, I just couldn't do it. Yeah, it would have bugged me. And as much as it would be nice, that's something I could have done later on, because it wasn't really affect anything else other than it itself. Yeah, I couldn't hack it. So basically, I've chopped a sort of a triangle section out of here, and then diced this wall. This opens open. You can see it's cut open at the moment, and pulled the wall in here and pulled the wall in there. So basically, that wall now builds volume to the back. And instead of having a separate piece there, this lower piece, which I've now got resin in, is another piece of fiberglass I laid up for the bottom. That raises up at the 8-degree angle. Similar to the roof, but obviously it's only a short distance, because it only goes from basically, let's get down here. It only goes from where the rear adapter or rear eagle plate comes up to here. So that's sort of rough 8-degree angle. Actually, at the moment, I'm just temporarily putting stuff in place, and I've got to start fiberglass in the inside edges. Then we'll probably put some short strand in the corner, curve them off, and we'll knock this corner off here and have a nice sort of 20-30 millimeter curve there. And then we'll go from a nice curve here. We'll slowly peter it out to an edge over there. So I have no idea how many different diffuser models I've had on this car over the last while, but this one I'm probably the most happy with now. So anyway, that's the diffuser. Another mold to make, but to be honest, I'm getting kind of used to making the mold, so I don't really mind too much. Plus, I'll be happy that this will be still effective. If it gains too much volumes, what I can do is put some vertical strakes in there to sort of restrict the volume gain at the back. It'll leave a void space, but most people won't even notice the fact that what the difference is. So if I end up having a carbon strake perfectly vertical there, and then put another one here to sort of block off all the volume gain there, and then we'll measure the effectiveness. But we can do the old trick with little bits of tape and string, and mount a GoPro to the back of the car, looking underneath the diffuser, and we'll see if we're getting any stalling. Lots of ways to figure out if that error is working. So diffuser, steering wheel we talked about last time. Lots of bits and pieces have come. Oil coolers, filters, pipe work, and whatever else for the back. I'm just trying to nail down everything that we need for the oil lines. Front clip. Front clip. We've done the main top section. Got a reinforcing across here just to add some extra rigidity to the mold, make sure it doesn't move. We have yet to do the individual parts for the secondary parts, so this is part 1. Part 2 started last week. Fortunately, I've been working all week, so I haven't had a chance to get to it. So this is the rear flange. Obviously has the apertures for what would be the door striker, the bonnet location strikers. The bonnet on this particular car is going to go forward and then pivot up. So basically these will be pins at an angle so that the 2 pins become parallel, because this surface here is slightly in. So there'll be 2 pins into plastic, so as the rear clip gets driven back onto the catches, then basically these 2 pins will locate it. Trying to get the sort of tight inner corners into this edge here sometimes can be a bit of a pain. We had some bubbles that were a pain to get out, so to make sure we've still got backing behind the gel coat, I just ground out where the little bubbles were, where the voids were, and we just put some short strand in there to make that a nice, simple, smooth transition. So actually it's almost gone off now. I'll just sand that off and then start putting more layers on. So we've got the couple of layers of gel, we've got the tissue. This is the first 225, and we'll be putting 300 and 450 gram on after that. So that's stage 2. This particular bar we have here, that's going to move. We're going to use that as a pivot. So this bar here, we'll build some little pieces up, stands from here and here, and then put slots in them, and then we'll move it over to the slot so we can then basically get the whole plug, should we say, and pivot at a quite a reasonably steep angle. And then when we get that steep angle, then I can laminate this piece here, because it'll be up kind of at an angle I can actually laminate. You can't laminate that because it just comes off. So yeah, that's the front clip. Yeah, we've really been sort of buying bits and pieces to make sure everything fits. Getting on with that. Obviously I had to laminate up another 4x4 flat sheet of fiberglass. Simple enough, just get a piece of aluminium, good old parcel tape around the outside edge, just put one layer of wax because it releases off it pretty good. And then I didn't even bother with gel coat this time. I just wanted to get it done quickly so I could play today. So yesterday I laid 2 layers of 450 gram with just straight resin, so no gel coat, just so I could make up the parts I needed. I thought I was going to have to do the sides, but it turns out I really just need a center section piece. So, but it's always good to have some of this around because it is quite thin. It's only about 1.5 mil thick. It's quite flexible, so you can basically bend it into, basically a sort of single axis curve. Bit awkward to do compound, obviously, but yes. So diffuser, I'm not happy with that. Obviously, where the black tape is now, this is here. That's just a replication of where I want the exhaust. So we'll end up with probably a billet section, either billet or carbon. I'm not really sure, to be honest, which. I don't know which is better for fire safety, because well, those 2 turbochargers are going to pretty much spit flames to a point. So you need it at least to be safe as far as that's concerned. So I'm going to do some form of a single exhaust outlet. We'd love to do it in titanium, but yeah, I can't titanium well, so that's another skill I'll learn at a later date. So, but that's going to be the exhaust exit, and we should have plenty of room still to put 1 3-inch pipe either side of the gearbox to here. Obviously, this is the in feed to the gearbox. This gearbox has an internal spray bar, so basically it's a tube going right through the gearbox and has holes in that tube opposite each gear set. So as the gears rotate, there's oil being fed basically into where the 2 gears mesh. So I will pull the oil out of the gearbox, filter it. It'll come through a positive displacement gear pump, then go through a thermostat to make sure we don't overcool it, and then we pump back into the gearbox, and obviously have an oil cooler as well. Then there's the oil cooler on the other side for the engine with the same thing. It's going to be externally, because obviously it's an external pump, so we need an external remote reservoir. But Mocol, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's actually, as far as I know, it's a British company, or Mocol's doing a really nice combined unit. So basically this is obviously your oil filter, but we have 4 ports on here. Now the 4 ports, if you look into here, there's a thermostat in there. So basically how that works is the oil comes in, gets filtered, and if it's too cold, the thermostat is open, and basically it allows for a bypass of the 2 hoses that would normally go to the oil cooler. So the oil will come in, it goes through the oil filter itself as such, and if the thermostat's shut, but basically it's too hot, then basically the oil will go to the oil cooler and come back. If the thermostat is open because it's too cold and we don't want to cool the oil, it basically puts a short circuit between the in and the out on the filter, on the well, it's post filter, but the in and the out on here, so into there and back out to the engine. So it'll go through the filter, but then path of least resistance, instead of going through the oil cooler, it will just come back and go straight to the engine. But it's nice to have one unit that does 2 things. So, and there's my 25-row oil cooler. So we're building parts. We have pretty much the very last key piece of the electronic side. It's on the way from Summit. I needed some high ampage solid state relays purely for the fans, but also ones you can variable drive. So it's called pulse width modulation. So I can vary speed one of the radiator fans, so I can run a low speed just to build up to it, and then once you want that one on high speed, then you'll trigger the second one on its own. So basically those two fans will be controlled by the ECU, but the high power side of the relay is 35 amps per fan, which is plenty enough. I think the fans are close to 20 amps on maximum draw. So I have what's basically a little MSD solid state relay coming that has actually 4 outputs, but we're only going to use them for fans, to be honest. One will be pulse width modulation, the other one will be solid on for the radiator fans, and then for the intercooler fans, basically it's just four small fans, and they're only pulling about, I think it's about 10 amps in total. So there'll be a spare relay, which is always handy to have a solid spare relay. But yeah, that's about the last thing I need as far as the components, as far as the electrical system's concerned. So I've pretty much got enough to, once I start that I can, apart from maybe pins and connectors, I've got all of the main parts, components, because I need to know exactly where everything's going to make sure I have room for it. So obviously I've got, you can see down here we have a pre-filter for the oil for the gearbox. It's a 100 micron stainless steel washable filter. We'll run the oil pump on this back wall here, and we'll run the cooler basically in this section here, because we will have air coming through to there, and then we'll run the oil cooler for the gearbox outside, then we'll run the oil cooler for the engine on this side. So we will come off of the dry sump tank, go into the pump, and from the pump we will go to the oil filter, and then to the oil cooler, and then from the oil cooler we'll have a line that has to run back and plumbs into the left hand side of the motor over there. So just need to know what fittings to get, whether 45s, 90s, etc, etc. So we need to basically know all the placement of everything. So yeah, lots of little bits and pieces coming. So that's the DP1. Pete and Rob have been playing with the Cobra. Basically moved this back section of the front wheel arch. They've chopped it out, moved it forward about a good sort of 1.5 to 2 inches. As you can see, it's got quite a large gap there already at the back. You know, it's partly to do with the styling of it. You can see there, they're not particularly small gaps, but it looked odd. So we've resculpted, or they've resculpted that with a little help from me, but they've done most of the work. Resculpted that, moved that arch further forward, and this lip here seemed to undercut a bit too soon, and it kind of didn't look right. So some of the nicer Cobra bodies, this is obviously a Mark III Factory 5, some of the nicer bodies have a little bit more closure on the wheel there. So they've added to that. We've now got to reshape the arch itself, or there's a little bit of a point here which needs to be smoothed off. So careful, don't want to fall on the Porsche. So yeah, they've got some resculpting to do there. So but yeah, that's good progress on that. Most of that was done outside because the weather was great, and yeah, it makes a lot of mess. So that's the Cobra. Still waiting for an update on the brakes in this one, but we're we're waiting for something. I'm not quite sure what it is. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, diffuser redo. I'm basically carrying on with the fiberglass, but collecting of parts, which is the fun stuff. So anyway, I hope you like the rear shape. I'm much happy with it now. Hopefully that should be quite dramatic if somebody ever actually pulls up to it. Mind you, if anybody in Alberta pulls up to the back of it, they're not going to see it because they're in a truck. They'll be looking basically straight over the top of the damn thing. So there we go. It's been a while for an update, but every day off, every hour I get that's free, I'm pretty much in here. You can ask the missus, because the much else work for the last 18 months. Anyway, speak to you all soon.